song. But I'll tell you a story that about probably the most notorious thing I've ever witnessed at a war. And this was my first war in the SCA ever.
Which one?
It was Great West, the first year they had it. And I came across a group of fairly naked men dancing around a fire, and I wasn't really sure what was going on. And one of them happened to be our king, and several members of the high officers, and I think a member of the bod, if I recall correctly.
I know them. Was it a good bod or a bad bod?
Oh, there were some good bods.
They were young back then.
Yeah. Well, we were all young and good in those days. So, and this, and of course, I can't remember this fellow's name, although I would say, since it's been such a long time since I was in Caid, if I mention the story, everyone knows his name there because it's kind of legendary. And he would write stories every single month for our Kingdom newsletter, and they were always very humorous.
Okay.
And so he and his wife, who were, king and queen at the time, were really into practical jokes. And so apparently, I'm walking through the dark. I'm trying to find my way back to camp. I've lost my group of ladies somehow. I happen to camp occasionally with my sister and brother-in-law, who were members of a household that was Landsknecht, who were also quite notorious for going around and tipping porta potties with people in them, and all kinds of fun drunken games after midnight. And there came a time where I was going in a slightly different direction in the SCA and wanted to be taken a bit more seriously, and so we had to part ways. So, anyway, I didn't make my reservation until quite late this particular year. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to go, and I wound up having to camp with the Landsknechts and put up with all those shenanigans. And one of the things that was traditional for them, they were quite patriarchal, and they would have one squire who would guard the camp and another one who would guard the women. So the women were escorted and tattled on wherever we went and whatever we did, because the fellows would take off and have their own agenda for the evening, so to speak, and they would roam from camp to camp doing God knows what. So
Wait, so did the protective squires assist with or tattle on the shenanigans?
Oh, they would tattle on the women.
But not the men.
Yeah, they didn't go with the men.
Smash the patriarchy.
So the squires would stay behind and guard the camp or keep an eye on us So if we decided to go off and leave the camp, we were escorted and then later tattled on. So anyway, I kind of was hurrying the women along. I said, come on, let's get ahead of William so we can talk and not be overheard. And I said, look, I know where there's a stone privy with a door in the front and a door in the back. And we're going to suddenly all spontaneously have to use the restroom when we get there. All of us. And then we're going to sneak out the back, which is what we did. And so suddenly we came upon the royal encampment where the naked men were dancing around the campfire.
Mm-hmm.
And we hear a group of women behind us suddenly chanting, "Take it off, take it off." And the king is dancing around in his skivvies, and he's got his shirt in his hand, and he's swinging it around and yelling at people in the onlookers, "Look, if I have to do this, you have to do it with me. Come on."
Peer pressure.
And
Really?
so various drunken slobs would whip off a garment of clothing and join the melee, and it just got bigger and bigger, and before you know it, women were tucking dollar bills in their waistline. Yes, it's the fun war. So I had no idea what was going on, and I was a little taken aback. And of course, this pales in comparison, I will tell you, to many other things I've seen since then. However, this was, for a start, quite, I don't know, I really, to this day, can't quite put a word on it. But
What am I getting myself into?
yeah, what the hell is this? And that's the king?
Unique.
Okay, so, and of course I was always very, one to not step away from body humor, but body acts were a bit beyond my repertoire, so. I was just standing there kind of in shock, and finally an arm reached out and grabbed me and said, okay, well, we're done with this, we gotta go because we see William coming up the road, and he's gonna tattle that we were here, so we need to disappear before he catches up with us. So we left abruptly, and then about 6 months later, there was a story in the Kingdom newsletter that explained what we had seen that night, and so I'll tell you what it said. There was a meeting that was held, a typical kingdom level business meeting, and the Queen had already prepared a practical joke that she wanted to pull off at the Great West War, and it was going to be a joke on her husband. And so everybody, all of the higher officers were briefed prior to the meeting, and told, I want you to go along and just, whatever I say, just go with it. And so, they had some old regalia that was well past its prime, and they were talking about disposing of it and what should they do. And so somebody in the group piped up and said, well, it's our tradition that we take it to a war and we burn it. And then they paused, they gave the just perfect pause that any comedian knows all too well, and they followed it with this. But of course, it's tradition for the Queen to dance naked around the fire as it burns. And the whole room just kind of went quiet, and the King was looking at her like, really? And they're all chiming in and going, oh no, really, it's got to be done this way or it can't be done. This is the thing. It's been our tradition forever. And he's like, I'm wondering how I missed that, So the time came, and everybody was quite convincing, and he's like, well, all right, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And then they went on with their business meeting, and the time of the war came, and they were doing a bit of a bardic in the royal encampment, and somebody stood up and said, well, it's time to burn the regalia. And the King's like, well, yeah, okay. And then they looked at him like, well, and the role of the Queen in this. She has to dance naked around the fire, as we told you. And he's like, oh no, that's not going to be happening. If anybody's going to be dancing naked, it's going to be me, and all of you will be doing it with me. And myself and my group of chums from my encampment happened to be walking past just as this scene was occurring. And we're like, what the hell? And for myself and a couple of the other ladies, it was our first war, and we're like, we were warned about this, but we didn't really expect that it would be this. So anyway, that's my little fun story from my first Great West War.